to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, September 8th, 2015. Starting to get into the month here. We've got lots and lots of stuff to talk about today. The talking points list, we're not going to be able to cover it all. And the phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And before we get into the news here, just a quick comment about Fox News. They have been totally conditizing us all morning long with this Kim Davis situation out there. They're just trying to fan up the Christians and the gays and for a fertile campaign ground for next year, or maybe they've given up trying to get the blacks and whites to riot against each other, and now they're going to try and get the Christians and the gays to riot against each other. I don't know, but they're really pushing this very, very hard. We'll be talking about that a little bit later in the program. They've only just now stopped reporting it to switch over to Dick Cheney out there screaming, why the Iran deal is bad, and we've got to stop it. Okay, Dick, here's your rifle, here's your parachute. Send us a postcard from Tehran. Now, what is not being reported in the corporate media, or just barely given lip service, there is a massive refugee crisis taking place all across Europe, coming up out of all these nations that have been subject to regime change and outright war by the United States of America. The refugees have broken through the police line set up by Hungary, which was saying, please don't come here. And they're expecting 800,000. And Austria and the European Union as a whole are trying to close their borders against this onslaught. And as a matter of fact, the Latvian foreign minister is saying that this refugee crisis may bring to an end the European Union's open border policy internally. One of the things that people liked about the EU was you could go from France to England to Germany without having to go through any kind of border control. That may be coming to an end. The refugee crisis fallout from America's wars of conquest may actually accelerate the end of the European Union, because if the borders go back up, everybody's going to be saying, well, let's just go back to being separate countries again. Now, some people are wondering if this refugee crisis was kicked off, was engineered to justify creating safe havens inside Syria. Another excuse to go on in and conquer Syrian territory, take it away from Bashar al-Assad and say, see, this is now a safe haven for the Syrian people. Well, if that was the plan, it's blown up in their face because the Syrians want out. After 4 years of clandestine U.S. war against their government, they're having to get out. Their economy's destroyed. The freshwater infrastructure is destroyed. There's no food. They're leaving. This is the biggest refugee crisis since World War II. Now, amazingly enough, Fox News has blamed Russia for the refugee crisis in Europe. And during one of their broadcasts, they came out and said, well, the only reason there is a refugee crisis is because Putin has been backing Syria's President Assad. And if he had left well enough alone so that we could just conquer them and get it over with, there wouldn't be a refugee crisis. So it's all Putin's fault. The lies are getting pretty desperate and pretty pathetic. And thankfully, pretty obvious. Well, a lot of people are saying, you know, are they going to solve the refugee crisis by continuing to drop more bombs on Syria? And the answer is no. The more you bomb, the more people try and get out of the way. Now, supposedly in Syria, ISIS, the evil enemy, as we have been repeatedly told, has now taken control of the Syrian government's last major oil field. ISIS seems to have the same military priorities as the United States government. Get the oil field, get the oil field, get the oil field. Very clearly, this represents a failure of our campaign against ISIS in Syria, which we all know is a hoax and a fraud. And Russia has stepped into this propaganda that the U.S. has created to say, yeah, we're going to help you against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We're going to provide assistance to the legitimate government of Syria, Assad, in order to help you rid Syria of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And, of course, that's absolutely the last thing the U.S. wants. And they're in a very, very difficult position, because we know the U.S. has been supplying ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria as a proxy army to use against Assad and as justification for airstrikes by the U.S. and its allies. Oh, we're not really making war on Assad and the Syrian people. We're after ISIS. And yet they keep missing ISIS and Al-Qaeda to the point where Donald Trump even made the comment, it looks like we're protecting them over there. Just figured that out. Did you, Don? So Russia is basically dismissing John Kerry's concerns about how this will all destabilize Syria like it isn't destabilized already. The U.S. is in a difficult place. How do they stop Russia from coming in and assisting Assad against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, having told the world that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are the enemy? It's not their country. If Syria's government says, please come help us, Russia, the U.S. doesn't really have anything to say about that. And the U.S. is pulling out all the stops. They have demanded Greece, which is now slaved to debt. They demanded Greece refuse Russia transit through their airspace for flights to Syria. They made the same request of Bulgaria. Bulgaria has already agreed. Now, Greece is saying, we don't think that's a good idea. It happens to be a violation of international treaties regarding freedom of travel through airspace and sea lanes of communication. But Bulgaria has already agreed. Russian aid flights to Syria will not be allowed to transit their airspace. Now, right now, we are seeing indications that the U.S. is putting pedal to the metal for this war on Syria. They're getting all these other countries in to join in the airstrikes against ISIS. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. Because they want to get Assad out and put a pliant U.S. puppet in. Because that's how the U.S. has built its empire since the end of World War II. Now, the refugee crisis is completely out of control. Germany says it could take maybe 500,000 refugees a year. But even Angela Merkel admits this influx of migrants is going to change Germany forever. Yeah, it's going to erase their sense of a national identity and a national culture, and maybe that's another reason for it. We know the New World Order people want to erase any sense of a national or cultural identity in all the people around the world. And it's backflashing on them because right now, in the middle of this EU migrant crisis, new polls are showing the majority of the British would vote for an exit from the European Union. And as a matter of fact, there's a video that was made by the British National Party that went out there talking to people saying, no, we don't want any more of these immigrants. We don't have enough jobs for the legal citizens here. It's a strain on public resources and infrastructure. Gee, Great Britain, welcome to our world. We've been dealing with the influx coming over our southern border. Now, of course, Israel, which is neck deep in this whole situation in Syria, has declared no, they will not accept a single Syrian refugee. In fact, Israel is going to build yet another wall to keep those refugees out, because apparently Israel has never heard about how an exodus of people will need refuge someplace. Apparently, just not in their experience or memory, somehow. Meanwhile, Israel's getting ready to demolish another 13,000 Palestinian structures as part of their campaign of ethnic cleansing. And finally, the CIA has released 130 pages of reports dealing with Israel's acquisition of weapons-grade nuclear materials from the United States through what's called the NUMEC scandal. And it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt Israel has nuclear weapons, and the U.S. government has known about it all along. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Also from Israel, okay, the Jerusalem Post ran an article saying that former President Jimmy Carter's cancer is God's punishment for his behavior toward Jews. This is the Jerusalem Post that's out there. almost celebrating the fact that Jimmy Carter has cancer. Yes, God's going to get you because you didn't give us what we want. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Andrew in New York. Aloha, Andrew. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I wanted to see, like, if you look at Europe and the U.S., like, their countries having economic trouble and, like, you see many homeless people here in the U.S., but somehow the government could give, like, benefits to illegal immigrants. Yeah,
we've been noticing that here in the United States. The illegal immigrants are getting a better deal from the government than the legal citizens here. And again, we're always hearing that Social Security is running out of money, the Veterans Affairs is running out of money, but there's always money for welfare for all these illegal immigrants.
And one thing that's kind of annoying is, like, for now, like, they call people Nazis, like, if they care about their countries, like, supposedly now it's like you're not supposed to care about your country or your identity for some reason.
Well, that's definitely the New World Order agenda. They want to destroy the idea of individual nations and cultures to sort of blend us into this single gray mush of humanity over which they can rule and extract wealth from.
Speaking about Syria, I think Israel got really mad that Vladimir Putin has sent troops there because they wanted to take Bashar al-Assad and then target Iran, but now they cannot attack Iran because Israel has all those ballistic missiles. If Israel attacks Iran, Syria is going to retaliate, and the Israelis cannot stop all those missiles. So
you need to understand that the Syrian government is saying that claims of actual Russian troops on the ground in Syria are fabrications to sell this bad Russia propaganda. Russia's aid to Assad so far continues to be primarily logistical support and setting communications, command and control, but actual Russian troops on the ground, Syria is saying hasn't happened yet, may happen in the future. But you need to understand the U.S. government is continuing the proud tradition going on back to Saddam's nuclear weapons of saying whatever they think is going to get you to go along with this agenda of blaming Russia for everything and throwing your babies onto the Russian bayonets, because if they don't get a bloody world war going real before the economy collapses, they're not going to be able to stay in control and in power.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over here to Colin in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Excellent. Just a couple questions for you. I've always wondered why the U.S. doesn't have hate crime laws for the Holocaust like we do here in Canada.
Well, they've been pushing for them, but the problem is all of the Holocaust laws basically come down to you're not allowed to ask questions, you're not allowed to look at the evidence, and of course we still have at least the remnants of a First Amendment. And here in the United States, we're becoming aware that all of these Holocaust denial laws are basically a flashing neon sign that some great deception is being hidden from us all.
Right. Okay. And Russia. I'm not so sure if the U.S. has using the war to try to get a third world war going. Why don't they use a false flag operation like they've done with all the other wars instead of try to get something going in Ukraine?
Well, I wouldn't rule out that they're not going to. I wouldn't say they're not going to do that. Of course, in this day and age, they have to realize that with a very skeptical global population, we're just not going to buy the first story that comes on out following the Big Bang. We're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11. And the propagandists are already out there saying anybody who doubts the government is mentally ill, they're kooks, they should be locked up, and the usual poison the well tactics about no plane at the Pentagon. But they have to realize that whatever false flag they stage is going to be looked at very carefully, analytically, critically, and skeptically by the population, not only the United States, but the entire world. And it is a deterrent to trying a false flag, but if they get desperate enough, they may very well go ahead and do something.
Yeah, well, pretty interesting times we're living here. Let's see what happens. Have a good day there, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, President Poroshenko up in Ukraine just made a speech listing his possible options to end the Ukrainian crisis. and he gave lip service to the Minsk agreements, and then his other two options were to aggressively liberate the eastern Ukrainian from the curse of their own government, and mentioned march on Moscow. And boy, that would certainly get a war going between the West and Russia if Poroshenko were to do that. Now, there's a very alarming article over in Sputnik News where the United States is saying that they will support the NATO agenda, meaning their own, even if all the other NATO allies drop out and say, we don't really want to be part of this. Oh, well, but the agenda is there and we will just do it unilaterally. So we're already back to the U.S. as the author and instigator of all these wars. We're going to grab a phone call here. Cameron in Great Britain. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Good afternoon to you. Michael, a couple of things. You've mentioned something to the last caller, saying that regarding this false flag stuff, they don't do it, well, they have to do it very carefully because people understand that and people realize that, and I agree with you. Everybody knows every false flag now.
Yes.
And anything that they do, they understand that it's a false flag. But the governments are not bothered about this. I think they're bothered about what the people are going to do, which is nothing so far. I mean, yes, we've known that from 9/11. Well, I personally knew from 9/11 onwards, everything, most of them, 9 out of 10, were false flags.
Yes.
But what have we done about it? Nothing.
We've become enlightened. Okay? And that is not nothing, because we have taken away from the federal government the ability to lie with impunity to the people. They don't have that. And because that was critical to their warmongering, that is a major victory for the independent media and the truth movement. They have to know inside Washington, D.C., that the odds of pulling off a successful false flag are virtually non-existent. They're down there with Hillary's poll numbers right now.
Very true, very true. And the other thing, Michael, if I can just quickly take your time, regarding all these usual suspects, allies and everything going to Syria. Real quick. Well, I think they're just trying to sort of put the pawns in place to start something with Russia, because they've
I agree. And we're going to have to let you go for the commercial break. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show. Now, another news story that is not being covered by the Kim Davis media conglomerate here in the United States of America. Turkish ground forces have entered Iraq in pursuit of Kurdish militants. Basically just gone into Iraq. So, ground invasion already underway. Now, remember back in April, there was this big story about how a Russian submarine had damaged a British fishing trawler. Ooh, bad Russians, bad Russians, bad Russians. A lot of headlines back then. Well, the Ministry of Defense has sort of had to own up that it was one of their own submarines that did the damage. Not Russian. But it made for great headlines at the time. All right, let's talk a little bit about the economy. The stock market, of course, did wonderfully well today, and nobody's believing it's got anything to do with the underlying value of the stocks. It's all pure manipulation. But along with the soaring stock market, we're seeing a spike in global debt default. Sovereign borrowers are falling behind on record sums of debt. And what's amazing is over at the IMF, Christine Lagarde is out there saying, we can solve all the economic problems with more debt. Just borrow more money from us and everything will be fine. Apparently does not understand the concept of that 11th marble. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
I've been thinking quite a lot about these violations of the foreign appropriations and the Glenn Act and the Symington Amendment to those acts. My question is, could we form a class action and take it to the Supreme Court to sue these people who violated those laws?
Well, in theory, yes. In practice, no. because the court system is part of the government, and what the Supreme Court has responded to previous class actions on various issues of government lies and deception by saying it's up to Congress to resolve the matter, and then Congress, of course, does absolutely nothing about it. So that's their out. You know, this is Congress' jurisdiction to resolve this matter, and then Congress simply won't do anything about it. So in theory, yes, but in practice, no. The system will always protect itself no matter what.
Well, I wonder if it would be possible to take the individuals by other individuals to the federal courts, through the federal court system, to bring them to book.
Well, I think the issue of sovereign immunity would be the first line of defense. And again, all they got to do is find a sympathetic judge. I mean, the fact that our courts are completely compromised, I think, was illustrated a couple of weeks ago when this Clinton-appointed judge was hearing Larry Klayman's RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation, refused to recuse himself over a very obvious conflict of interest, and then just arbitrarily threw the case out. End of story.
Yeah, I think that seems to be a pattern in the UK and the US.
Yeah, well, it's a pattern in every corrupt government here, but what we can do and should do is remind everybody that, yes, Israel has nuclear weapons. They've had them since the 1970s. The U.S. government has known it. Israel is not this poor, helpless victim threatened by all the Arab nations and needing billions and billions of dollars of weapons given to it, not just by the United States, but by all the countries in Europe. And we need to basically, going into the election next year, is keep a list of everybody who's doing Israel's bidding, trying to stop this Iran deal, and vote them all out. Remember, everybody in the House of Representatives is up for re-election next year. And we should do a real house cleaning and get leaders in the Congress who are going to put America first, second, and third, and stop listening to this foreign puppet ruler.
What I find most disturbing in the most recent news is this invasion by the Turks into northern Iraq, into the Kurdish areas.
Yes.
I do hope that the Kurds fall back and let them extend their lines of communication, then cut them off.
Well, that would be what I would be considering. I don't know the exact terrain where this is all taking place, but I think the Kurds have the home court advantage in that part of Iraq. They know where everything is.
Yeah, it's quite mountainous, in that area.
Okay, anything else?
Not really. I just wanted to test the theory that we could bring these violators of the laws of America to justice, but as you explained, it doesn't seem to be.
No, it doesn't. I mean, look at all the crimes that our politicians have committed, even been charged and indicted, and then some president down the road signs a pardon, and that's the end of the story.
Well, look at Hillary Clinton today.
Yes, very much so. In fact, Forbes had an interesting article on that. We're going to be talking about that when we get into Hillary's email server and the scandals thereof. Anything else?
Well, she just claimed that she didn't break any laws, yet she broke the law that her own husband, when he was president, instituted about the use of servers outside the system.
Yeah, and she broke another law, an executive order by Barack Obama, but she's broken a major law that nobody's talking about just yet, and we're going to be covering that when we get into the Hillary section of today's.
I'll be listening with interest, Michael.
All right, you got it. We're going to let you go. Thank you very much. Getting on back to the economy. Over at NatWest, they've had yet another technical glitch that made it impossible to withdraw cash at ATMs or pay at electronic payment stations at stores. It's a technical glitch. Ooh, technical glitch. No, it isn't. I think technical glitch has become the excuse for when a financial institution hits the cash available wall. And they literally run out of liquid cash for that moment, so they'll say, oh, it's a technical glitch, until they can get some new money in to get the business going again. I think a lot of these financial institutions are hovering at the edge of insolvency, and they're basically using computer glitch, hackers, as an excuse to cover up what's really going on. That they're scrambling, trying to stay solvent here. Now then, since 1978, the average pay has increased 997% for CEOs, but only 10.9% for workers. That's not even covering the inflation increase in the cost of living. Despite that, there was a video that has gone viral around the net where 3 former U.S. Treasury secretaries and a Facebook executive are talking about income inequality, and they're laughing about it. They think it's just funny as all heck. And you have to see it to believe it. This could be their let them eat cake moment. Now, right now in the U.S., student loan debt is $1.2 trillion. That is far greater than all the credit card debt, which is $700 million. And they're all falling behind. There's a big student loan bubble that's about to go bang. All right, we're coming up on another commercial break. We'll be back with the campaign news after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about politics now, this segment. And the latest polls are continuing to show Donald Trump surging ahead. He is now leading Hillary in theoretical matchups. If it comes down to Trump versus Hillary Clinton next year, polls are showing Trump will win. He's running in front. And surprisingly, he's getting a lot of support from traditional Democratic demographics. 25% with blacks, 31% with Hispanics. Man seems to be unstoppable. Rupert Murdoch has a different theory. He's out there saying that Joe Biden is going to run for the White House next year, and more importantly, Biden will win. Or at least that's what he's saying. That's what Murdoch is saying. And Biden is doing very well in the polls for a guy who hasn't actually stepped into the race yet. The instant he does, we can expect another 20 on his poll numbers here. So let's talk about Hillary Clinton and her emails. Remember when this whole thing first came out, Hillary Clinton said there was no classified information on my private server. And the corporate media missed an obvious question there. Okay. The job of Secretary of State involves a lot of classified information. And if Hillary wasn't putting it on her private server, and she wasn't using her government email account, which is why we know she had the private server, then what server did she use for classified information? That should have been a question everybody was asking in the corporate media, and of course they didn't. Oh no, Hillary will cut off the interview if we ask that question. We can't afford to do that. Well, Hillary is now admitting, yes, there's classified information on the server, but it was classified after I got it, and who knew? Well, a long, long time ago, when I was with NASA, I got to experience classified documents. And when they are classified, everybody known to be in possession of them gets notified. However, as it turns out, this latest claim by Hillary is absolutely bogus, because there's been yet another review of the contents of Hillary's email server, and they are finding documents that were classified at the moment of creation, which means they were classified when she got them. Some of them top secret. So, now that brings us to another question here that corporate media refuses to ask. Hillary Clinton is now admitting that some of the emails on her private server were indeed classified. But once Hillary Clinton stopped being Secretary of State and became a private citizen again, she was not authorized to be in possession of classified documents. They were supposed to be sent back to the originating agencies or destroyed. And yet, they were still on her private server years later to be found by Trey Gowdy and other investigators. That is a violation of law right there. Being in possession of classified documents she does not have the clearance to have. That's a big one right there. Now, Hillary Clinton is out there saying she will never apologize for using the private email server. Everything was the letter of the law, which we already know is another lie. Now, Hillary's campaign has announced a plan that the new Hillary, version 3.2, the golden cut, is going to have more humanity and more humor and more authenticity, which tells you right there none of it's authentic. They're basically advertising that Hillary is going to try a new, made-up character, persona, a new act. Now, there's an interesting story from Investment Watch blog. Apparently, at a recent campaign event, Hillary was trying to take advantage of her star power. Oh, everybody wants to get in and see her in person, like a rock star. Everybody who went in was required to sign a loyalty pledge that they would vote for Hillary Clinton no matter what before they were allowed inside. Now that signals extreme fear on the part of Hillary's campaign that Hillary's going to lose more of her supporters as this stuff comes out. By the way, at a recent event up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, there was a women's choir who took an old gospel song and replaced the name Jesus with Hillary and sang it to, her worshipfulness, Hillary Rodham Clinton. And, of course, that's caused a huge stir as to just, how does Hillary see herself? As the new Messiah? Now, there was an interesting article over in Forbes. Should Democrats nominate a candidate at risk of indictment? Which seems like a common sense question. But the article goes on to talk about all these people in high positions in government who've been accused of crimes, but nothing ever comes of it. Really? I mean, look at all these other people who skated off scot-free from all the wrong things they did. And to me, this reads like a desperate attempt to save the Hillary campaign by making the argument that unless and until she is formally charged with a crime, which we know is not going to happen in the corrupt United States government, that people should forget all the brouhaha about email servers or dead White House lawyers or bogus cattle futures trades, tainted blood, and continue to support Hillary as our presumed candidate for the White House. Okay, we're going to go ahead and grab a quick phone call. Chers in, I'm not sure that's right, in Michigan. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Oh, it's Chris in Michigan. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm fine. What's on your mind?
Yeah, were you aware of John McAfee's announcement to run for president?
I'd heard something about it, but I don't take his campaign any more seriously than I take my own.
Now, do you think that a person who's been around since the beginning of the computer and the Internet would be a good candidate for privacy issues?
Well, he would certainly be somebody that I would seek the advice of on privacy issues, but remember, the president isn't necessarily supposed to be an expert on computers. Obviously, Hillary isn't. But, we're looking for somebody who is going to make decisions and set policy in keeping with the desires and wishes of the American people. And basically, the president's job is to throw cold water on foolishness coming out of the Congress. And I don't think McAfee would be electable because of some of the scandals, very real scandals in his past. So it's interesting, and it's probably an exercise in his ego. But I wouldn't take it too seriously.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say Mike Rivero for president.
He could hardly do any worse. That's my campaign motto. He could hardly do any worse. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, it's Rivero2016.com. I actually have a campaign website, and you can get buttons and T-shirts and all of that stuff. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this next year. That's what this is all about, having a lot of fun. But yeah, it really is. I mean, in this day and age, that's almost a workable campaign slogan. He could hardly do any worse than the other candidates who are out there.
I think you should change it to pouring cold water on foolishness.
I might. I mean, I've got a couple of slogans already, like anything but Hillary. You know, I haven't even looked at my own team. Okay, so we're going to let you go here. We're coming up. Thank you. We're coming up here on the top of the hour. Getting on back to Hillary. Latest NBC poll. Hillary's poll numbers are dropping in the key early primary states. She's trailing almost all the Republicans. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is also saying their polls are showing Clinton's support is evaporating. Actually, he used slipping, but it doesn't really make a difference. Hillary's on her way out. You know, unless there's a sudden surge of small plane crashes and crazed lone nut assassins, Hillary's not going to be returning to the White House. Apparently, there was a man shot in the head before the Brooklyn parade. Reportedly, Governor Cuomo aide. Still waiting for more details and information about that. And a former David Cameron advisor and BBC star has been charged with child sex offenses. This is getting completely out of hand. I may have a theory about this out-of-control child molestation. We'll be talking about that later in the show. We're going to take a break for the top of the hour news, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And along with the earlier report about how the CIA has released hundreds of pages of documents confirming that, yes, Israel has been building nuclear weapons since the 1970s. They got much of their weapons-grade uranium from right here in the United States of America. The U.S. government has known it all along. Now, do you remember back when Obama had his first press conference as president and Helen Thomas asked him a direct question, what nations in the Middle East have nuclear weapons right now? And Obama didn't answer that. He just tap-danced away and talked about we view the danger of proliferation very, very seriously, and the next day Helen Thomas was gone from the White House press corps. The U.S. government knows Israel has nuclear weapons. There was another document declassified showing how the U.S. helped Israel develop hydrogen bombs. They know it. They've known it all along. And they also know that under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and under the Glenn Act, every single penny of your tax money taken from you and sent to Israel is illegal under U.S. law. So a lot of stuff is coming out now. We just put up a story about a new book that's come out regarding Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 that also is reporting that Flight 370 was accidentally shot down by a joint U.S.-Thai military exercise. These things do happen. The Iranian Airbus shot down by the USS Vincent's TWA 800. It does tragically happen all the time, and it always gets covered up. Now, there's another story that came out of privacysos.org, quoting on local Boston police officers who were interviewed by a Globe columnist, and they said they all just thought that Tamerlan Tsarnaev was an FBI informant, that he was some kind of a spook and he got set up and used, which is something all of you FBI informants out there ought to remember. That loyalty your government demands from you is a one-way street. And this government can and will set you up to be framed for a horrible crime and then killed to cement the official story whenever they feel it's necessary. Just think about that while you're trying to get some sleep tonight. Now, over in England, the British police have arrested 3 of their own officers for planning a fake police kidnap and beheading. Going to be a phony terror attack, and somehow the secrecy got blown. And these 3 officers have been arrested and are being investigated on various crimes, including conspiracy to commit misconduct in a public office, misuse of police systems. A lot of hoaxing going on in the world. Now, over in Baltimore, in the Freddie Gray case, first of all, Baltimore says it has reached a $6.4 million wrongful death settlement with Freddie Gray's family. Meanwhile, the lawyers for the police officers who are being tried for the murder are demanding the case be moved out of Baltimore, saying that they can't get a fair trial there. And as much as I find the behavior of the police officers objectionable, yeah, there is merit. They're not going to get a fair trial there. Now, as you've probably seen, if you've been watching the corporate media all day long, they have been talking about Kim Davis. This was the Kentucky clerk who refused to issue marriage certificates to gay couples because of her religious beliefs. And they've turned her into this martyr for the Christian anti-gay cause. And Fox News just spent all morning on her release from prison, and they had a big rally and a press conference set up to just pound on this thing. And we were being conditized with this story. They weren't talking about Turkey actually invading Iraq, going after the Kurds, who I thought were supposed to be on our side. But it's getting very confusing figuring out who's really on whose side over there. But from Fox News editorial position, this was the most important thing happening in the world today. Now, if Kim Davis felt that her religion prohibited giving marriage licenses to gays, the proper response would have been either to refer the gays to somebody else who could grant the license, or for Kim to request a change of jobs. And that's just common sense, whether it's government or a private employer. If you're working for a company, you are being paid to do what the company tells you to do. And if your morals or ethics say, I don't want to do this, you are free to leave. You are not free to say that this company or this government office must conform to your particular religious beliefs. Now, what's really going on here is we head into the election season. Every 4 years we go through the same ritual of fanning up the ultra-Christians against the gays and getting them to hate and spit at each other so the candidates can talk about that as a campaign issue so they don't have to talk about the economy and all the wars. And I guess after all these years of trying and failing to get the blacks and whites to riot against each other, maybe they just decided they'll switch to the Christians and the gays. Now, there's another story over at WorldNet Daily where there's a movement among fundamentalist Christians to go to homeschooling because the public school will not teach their religion. And they want their children raised with Christian values like burning the witches and burning the gays. And while I would applaud those parents for getting their kids away from the mandatory vaccination schedule, what we're seeing here is theocracy rearing its ugly head in America. Now remember, the Founding Fathers understood the only way to guarantee religious freedom for everybody was to not allow any one religion access to civil power. That's why the United States does not have a state religion. The Christians would like to claim it does, but we don't. There is a wall of separation. There's the people who believe in the giant hairy cosmic muffin or whatever it is they believe in, the flying spaghetti monster, Ahura Mazda, Quetzalcoatl, whatever you want to believe in. Fine, go have fun. There's a little building with a tax exemption where you can go and talk about the cosmic Jewish zombie who's his own father and women made from ribs, magic apples, talking snakes, whatever you want to talk about. But out here in the real world, the civil government is not subservient to anyone's religious beliefs. And it's not supposed to be. Because anytime any one religion gains civil power, the first thing they do is persecute the other religions, persecute the non-religious, and say, we must force everyone to think the way that we do. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who, because of the cosmic Jewish zombie magic apple talking snake thing, think gay marriage is wrong. And my solution for you is, if you think gay marriage is wrong, don't marry a gay. Problem solved. Great evil comes from people thinking they have some divine right to go on out and force the rest of the world to think and believe as they do. I actually had somebody send me an email saying, these gays are forcing their lifestyle on us. And I said, okay, how have they made you gay? No, I'm not gay. I'm not gay. Oh, did they tie you in a chair and force you to watch gay sex? No, they didn't do. They're out there and, you know, with their chosen lifestyle. And I said, well, you're out there with your chosen lifestyle. Okay? You know, there's a great deal of wisdom in that old saying, live and let live. And it's hard to imagine the historical Jesus hanging out with 12 guys all the time, having such a hard line about homosexuals. You know, what's that old saying? What would Jesus do? I don't think he'd be out there, you know, screaming, we've got to set fire to the gays. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as you know, we're coming up on another anniversary of the 9/11 false flag terror attack, and there are truth symposiums popping up all over. Obviously, there's going to be one in New York. They've even got one on a cruise ship. Boy, am I sorry they didn't ask me to be a speaker there. That's an aside here. But the reality is that there is ample evidence that 9/11 was a hoax. The new Pearl Harbor, as it was termed in the documents from the Project for the New American Century. And our best way to prevent or to deter a new false flag hoax, to start a war with Russia or China or whoever, is to constantly rip apart the old hoaxes and tell everybody this is how you were fooled. Because we live in an age where most Americans now understand the government lies to us about pretty much everything, aided by the corporate media, to trick us out of our money, our obedience, and the lives of our children in these wars of conquest. And as usual, the propagandists are out there trying to push this no plane at the Pentagon nonsense to poison the well, because inevitably, when the corporate media makes fun of anybody not buying the official story, the first thing they say is, oh, these people don't even think there was a plane at the Pentagon, which is why they put it out there. It's a propaganda trick called poisoning the well. There's a lot of hard evidence out there that we were not told the truth about what was going on. 8 of the 19 accused hijackers were found to still be alive after 9/11. One of them was a pilot for a Saudi airline who sued the U.S. government for defamation. And one, that was not reported in the American corporate media, I might add. There was the short selling on the stock market, where all of the involved airlines' stocks were short sold, so that following 9/11, somebody made a huge amount of money. And some of this insider trading led directly to the CIA's highest ranks, including Buzzy Krongard. That one is so well documented, it's even mentioned in the James Bond movie Casino Royale, which was on just last night. There was this whole incident with the anthrax that was mailed to Congress and members of the media with these envelopes and letters that were made to look like they were written by semi-literate Muslims. And then it turned out the strain of anthrax in the letters came from a U.S. government biological warfare laboratory. We have Giuliani on video saying that he was told the World Trade Center and Building 7 were going to collapse. Who told him? Because before 9/11 and since, no steel-framed building had ever collapsed from a fire. And the World Trade Towers were designed to survive impact by aircraft heavier than the ones that actually hit there. And especially with Building 7, it was not hit by an aircraft. I mean, have you been seeing all these strange explosions going on over in China? Massive explosions, equivalent to 20 tons of TNT. The buildings are still standing. And yet the U.S. government wants to convince you that a hardened government, federal government building that housed federal government offices, was built extra strong, extra explosion-proof, extra fireproof, came down into its own footprint from a bunch of simple office fires. We have documented that the Federal Emergency Management Agency was on the ground in New York the night before 9/11. And common sense, you have to look at just how quick all the assets were there at 9/11 versus how the government handled Hurricane Katrina, where it took them a week to get down there. There's the video of the collapse of World Trade Center 7 that captures the sounds of demolition charges. And there's the fact that BBC, Fox News, and CNN all reported the building had collapsed 22 minutes before it actually happened. Nobody has an explanation. And finally, of course, and all of this is on the front page of What Really Happened, and we're going to be reprising it as we get closer to the anniversary, the wreckage of the World Trade Towers shows clear signs of demolition cutter charges on the load-bearing members. And finally, of course, there's my favorite, the Secret Service at Booker Elementary, the dog that did not bark. And for those of you who are Sherlock Holmes fans, it's a reference to the story Silver Blaze, where Holmes determines that the owner of the house is the criminal, because in the dark of night when the crime occurred, the dog wasn't barking, and the only person the dog would not bark for would be the master. And we have exactly the same thing. You have George W. Bush sitting at Booker Elementary School reading about pet goats. He's told by Andy Card a second plane has hit the towers. Everybody knows this is a terror attack. Bush's presence at the school was in the media a week ahead of time. There's an airport just 4 miles away, and yet the Secret Service didn't move to take him out of the classroom, put him in his little armored limousine, and drive in a random direction to foil a possible inbound. The inaction by the Secret Service tells us they knew President Bush was not a target that day. And the only way they could know that is if they knew what the targets were going to be. And that proves that the Bush administration was complicit in this hoax, this false flag. Then there's the story of the Israeli spy ring. Just before 9/11, the FBI found the largest foreign spy ring ever uncovered in the United States of America, spying for Israel. They were using art students, people at kiosks and shopping malls. Were using the company, the Israeli company that does phone record processing for American companies, Amdocs, and Converse Infosys, which is the Israeli company that got the contract to put phone tapping as a built-in function to our phone networks. And Carl Cameron, in his 4-part story on Fox News, quoted a U.S. government official saying that arrested Israeli spies, the dancing Israelis, that there was evidence that connected them to 9/11, but that evidence was classified by the United States government. It's all a fraud. And how we protect ourselves from another fraud is to keep reminding everybody of all these frauds. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, the Lusitania, it was not carrying weapons. Pearl Harbor was a surprise. And on and on and on. Sooner or later, the American people are going to have to wake up and realize they have been lied to their entire lives by the government and the corporate media on a wide variety of topics. Safety of GMOs and vaccine, human-caused global warming. The economy is in recovery. How much more are you going to take? I will have a truthful government or no government at all. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're just getting word that Israel has launched a military offensive into Gaza. Armored vehicles have basically gone on in. They're flattening farm fields. The official explanation is that Israel needs a new security buffer zone. And this is a trick that Israel has played time and time again. They'll declare that we must have a safety and security buffer zone, and they'll bulldoze the land flat, put up a fence. Then they'll start building inside the buffer zone until it's full. And they say, we need a new buffer zone, and they send in the bulldozers again. That's what they're doing. Now, earlier I was talking about how maybe this whole Kim Davis situation was being fanned up to get the gays and the Christians screaming at each other for political gain. And by the way, under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, It requires Kim Davis to be reassigned if her religion prohibits her from doing her duty. This should never have gone this far. This was fanned up to be a big issue. But they're still out there trying to get the blacks and whites at each other. Somebody painted Black Lives Matter for target practice on a veteran's home. They're saying it's a serial vandal down in Florida. Serial vandal's probably an undercover informant trying to stir up trouble. Remember, study the history of COINTELPRO back in the 1960s, where the FBI was deliberately fanning up race hatred in the United States to divide blacks and whites and keep them from uniting in their opposition to the war in Vietnam. And now we have more wars we're opposed to, so they're going back to the same old trick. Let's get the gays and the Christians hating each other. Let's get the blacks and the whites hating each other. Let's get everybody fighting amongst themselves, and then we're free to go on out and conquer the world for something that we'll call democracy. Now, about a week ago, there was a big stink up in Massachusetts where a police officer claimed that some black people shot his car, forced him off the road, caused an accident, destroyed the car. It has now come out. This was another hoax. The cop shot his own cruiser and set it on fire to blame the black community. He's been exposed. It's being reported on WCVB Channel 5 in Boston. We live in an age of lies. We're literally in a real-life version of the Matrix. Everything presented to us on these little screens in front of our eyes by the corporate media and the government is a manufactured illusion to keep us their willing slaves. Now, speaking of anthrax and the big anthrax hoax during 9/11, there's been another big stink how the Pentagon says supposedly mistakenly sent live anthrax particles to laboratories in some states, and it's been getting bigger and bigger, and finally the Pentagon has now said, and they're still insisting this was a mistake, live anthrax spores were sent to all 50 of the United States. Now here's an interesting little story. This is being reported over in crack2.com. Back on August 25th, an officer came across a couple of lawmakers who are always out there preaching family values. And this car was parked at Lebanon Hills Regional Park in Eagan. And the officer caught these two people who are both married to others. And they were making out, and the girl's pants were unzipped and pulled down. And the politicians are saying, oh, the officer's lying. The officer's lying. The officer just hates politics. He's just lying about this stuff. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, as you know, we're starting to enter the era of self-driving cars. And there's some glitches to get out from there. And there's an interesting sequence in the movie I, Robot with Will Smith, where everybody is supposed to allow the highway computers to control their car, and Will Smith likes to drive his own, which I can kind of understand. Jeremy Clarkson and I share a common dislike of cruise controls and computers driving our cars for us. But there's a more alarming development that's being talked about over in the Daily Bell, which is that once cars are able to drive themselves, who gets higher priority on telling the car where to go? You or maybe the police? And just as we know that all of these electronics that are in the current cars have been hijacked to spy on you for the government, will the self-driving cars have a built-in facility where the police can just tell the car, lock the doors and bring them on over? There's a good reason to build a kit car right there. Which, by the way, is a lot of fun, you know, for you gearheads. Just a simple little engine, transmission, brakes, wheel, steering. No electronics, no cruise control, no NSA tracking, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth. Just a simple, elegant, mechanical car. And I'm giving my age away here. My first car was a Volkswagen Beetle. I paid $100 for it. And one of the reasons I loved it was it didn't matter what went wrong on it, you could just fix it yourself, usually quite easily. Fan belt breaks, buy a pair of women's pantyhose, tie them around the pulley tight, you're good to go. Today's cars are designed to support an industry of repair technicians. You're not allowed to get into your car. In fact, remember, the car's electronics are protected by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. You're not allowed to peek in and see the programming of the computers that have control of so much of your car. And I won't take that uppity behavior from a vehicle. Now, here's another story coming out of the Daily Mail. It's called the Chemical Koch Scandal. And it's talking about this scandal coming out where thousands of patients with no history of mental illness were being prescribed multiple antipsychotic drugs. Because, after all, it makes money. Now, antipsychotic drugs are very, very powerful. They're supposed to treat dementia, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. They're much more potent and damaging even than the antidepressants. And by the way, I think it's time to ask a question here. We already know that there is a link between antidepressants and mass shootings, strange suicides. But I think it's time to go beyond and say, what else are these antidepressants doing? Because I don't think it's an either-or situation where either you're perfectly healthy, or you're, down there at the local gun-free zone with a rifle. We could be seeing an increase in all kinds of non-fatal, non-newsworthy violence and behavior caused by these drugs. Now, I've already looked at the growth rates of per capita domestic violence. They track exactly with the increase in these antidepressant drugs. More and more street violence seems to be happening these days. And beyond that, I'm looking at this sudden surge of child molestation scandals all over the place. And we know one thing these antidepressants do is they inhibit your self-control, your impulse control. If you don't have your emotions intact, you've lost your moral compass. And I think we need to look about if there is a link between prescription antidepressants and this horrible abuse of children. Because it just seems to be everywhere these days. Doesn't make any sense at all. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about mistakes with pharmacology. The links between prescription psychiatric medication and some very bizarre behavior we're starting to see throughout the entire culture. And I think it's important to understand that different people will respond different ways to these medications. We know that one possible reason for the out-of-control police violence in this country is that police, as a class, take more of these antidepressants than the average American. And poor impulse control is one of the known symptoms. And we have to ask, more than just mass shootings and suicides, which get headlines, are there other symptoms that are not being noticed by the corporate media, possibly intentionally, also linked to these medications? Domestic violence, street violence, fights in bars, road rage, big problem. And this incredible surge in child sexual molestation we keep seeing all over the place. Have we, in fact, drugged ourselves to be a nation of insane people who just behave sociopathically? Another story coming out of Investment Watch blog, an anti-malaria drug given to soldiers has now been linked to depression, including suicides of veterans. But hey, it's making money for Big Pharma, and that just makes it okay. If those soldiers kill themselves, then we don't have to spend the money to treat them anymore. Just get them out of the way here. Do you realize that Donald Trump is the only major presidential candidate who has spoken out about the dangers of vaccines? And he's justified in saying that because there's an article over in TruthStream Media that's following up on something I commented on earlier in the year, where all of a sudden there was this emergence of what was then being called non-polio paralysis, striking people who were getting the polio vaccination. Now, polio, in theory, has been eradicated from our country. Not anymore. And now the Washington Post is reporting that the polio vaccine is causing the new epidemic of polio, and they're laying the blame on a mutated version of the polio virus that is created in the vaccine itself. And then they wonder why we are resistant to laws mandating vaccines for us. Now, we had commented before that there was a known issue with the oral polio vaccine, which used an attenuated virus, returning to full potency after administration. Oh, it looks like polio, it's paralysis, it's a tragic thing, looks like polio, but it can't be polio because you had the vaccine. And the video has surfaced from down in Mexico at a clinic that was handing out HPV vaccines to young girls. And the girls went into convulsions. Somebody got that on video. Meanwhile, out in California, parents are starting to mount a recall against the author of their mandatory vaccine laws. The law that says you may not refuse a vaccination for personal or religious beliefs. You will let us stick a needle in your kid, you will be forced to pay for it. And if the kid gets sick, well, Obamacare will take care of them. Now, last week we talked about this scandal where it emerged that a so-called independent GMO expert that was out there singing the praises of Monsanto's products had in fact received $25,000 from Monsanto. Now, over in Scotland, they're considering an opt-out on GMO. Under the current rules in the European Union, individual member states can opt out of GMO. And the Scottish government is seriously considering it. And there's been an open letter signed by 30 top scientists and experts in support of the ban. It is a dangerous technology. And it doesn't even do what it's supposed to do. Another story coming out of Natural Society, over in Great Britain, they spent $5 million or pounds on an experimental GM wheat crop that was supposed to prevent pests. And it failed utterly. But farmers are still being forced to plant GM seed because once their fields are contaminated with the pollen, they have to keep on buying seeds from the GMO companies, or they can be sued for patent infringement when any crops they plant on that ground become contaminated with the pollen. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. We're going to go to Al in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Doing good.
All these things you're talking about, I mean, they have a really deep effect on me because when I was 3 years old, I almost died from being vaccinated. I'm 50.
Mm-hmm.
I went into convulsions, had to go to the hospital, blah, 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 blah. When I was 11, I had my first fluoride treatment. I ended up in the hospital for 3 weeks. I almost died. And so, I mean, this stuff isn't natural. It has no business being in our body. A couple of months ago, my granddaughter got vaccinated. I think it was, what would it have been? 18-month vaccination. So MMR, I think.
Yes.
It was the last one that she was ever going to have. So my wife says to the doctor, "What's in this?" And she kind of looked at her funny. I wasn't there. And aluminum. And you're going to put that in her arm? Well, yeah. Whoa, aluminum's a neurotoxin.
It's been linked to Alzheimer's,
right?
It's been linked to Alzheimer's.
Exactly. When I was about 30, I went for hay fever shots. I used to suffer horribly. So, I figured I'd try and do something a little different. And the second to the last shot, it really hurt when it went in. And, you sit in the waiting room for about 10 minutes, and then you go home. After a few minutes, I started feeling I started feeling there was a million of these bugs crawling in under my skin. What an awful, gee, just thinking about it gives me the willies. Anyways, I had some adrenaline put in around the jab. And the next time I saw my doctor, he said he thinks that he injected it right into my vein.
Yeah.
So, right into my bloodstream. This is how vaccinations go bad.
Well, the other thing,
you a vaccination,
the other thing we need to look at,
into your blood system.
It is a primary faith, if you will, of the big pharmaceutical companies that all human beings are biochemically identical. And we know that is not true. Based on your genetic makeup, your response to certain chemicals will vary. Yes, there are people for whom prescription antidepressants won't do anything at all. And there are those where it will flip them out because they are not identical people. And unfortunately, because of mass manufacturing being the path to profits, the attitude of big pharmaceutical corporations is we're going to make one-size-fits-all medication, and if it kills a few people, we'll pay off the settlements, and we're still making profits, so that's all that really matters. It's a numbers game. And it's not really about health anymore. It's just about, finding a way to sell us more medicines. Even for things that don't exist. Remember, the guy who came up with the term attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, shortly before he died, he admitted it was a completely fictitious disease to sell more pills with.
Well, my doctor didn't want to put my son on Ritalin because, the teacher said, well, he's hyperactive, the ADHD, whatever, hyperactive attention deficit disorder. My doctor didn't want to do it, but they wouldn't let him go to school, so he went on it, and, the first day he was on it, when I came home from work, he was a zombie. I said, but you know what, that's it. So I went and I talked to the teachers and the principal, and I said, the problem here is you're not teaching the kids. I was like this when I was a child. You bore me.
Yeah, that's what we called it when I was a kid. There was, teacher is boring me because teachers spending all of their time with the dullards, and it's the way it worked. I was put on Ritalin briefly. It actually made me more hyperactive. So, see, it's not one size fit all. We got to take a break for the news. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Now, over in Fukushima, TEPCO has announced that in order to save the Pacific Ocean, they're going to have to start dumping some of the surplus radioactive water that has been accumulating in these giant drums all around the ruined reactor. Now, I don't know what TEPCO thinks they mean by saving the Pacific, but maybe it's just they felt they had to say something because they've run out of places to store all this radioactive water from trying to keep the remains of the reactors cool. It is a mess. Now, there's another story. This came out of stuff.co.New Zealand. Former spy paid to infiltrate Greenpeace and unions. And it's basically talking about this ex-spy who has now sued police for exposing the fact that he was an undercover informant. Supposedly he's been awarded some kind of a settlement to make it all go away. But Rob Gilchrist sued the police for a little over $500,000 in 2013, alleging he'd been hung out to dry by the police after infiltrating activist groups and trade unions on their behalf. Now, his role as a spy was revealed in December of 2008 when his then girlfriend found incriminating emails on his laptop where he was basically ratting out what they were doing to the police. And it is a reminder that governments all over the world, here in the U.S., have paid undercover informants that are trying to join your group to cause trouble or just to spy on you. And you need to remember that. Now, apparently, over at the Burning Man Festival, they sent in undercover FBI agents to prevent terrorism and test out new intelligence collection technology. Bull biscuits. They just wanted to look at all the naked girls and take their pictures and have you, the taxpayer, pay for it. Burning Man is not a haven for terrorism. It's a big party. Now, speaking of naked girls, there is an Android app that is out there, and you need to be aware of it. It's sold as offering porn viewing, and instead it takes pictures of you while you're watching the porn, and then basically blackmails you, saying it will post them publicly where people can see you doing what you do when you're looking at porn. And it's ransomware. It locks your phone. Turning the phone off and on won't clear it, and users have been forced to pay $500 to get their phone turned back on. And once again, the NSA has proved how completely inept and powerless they are against real computer criminals. And there's another iPhone hack out there now. 225,000 iPhone users have been hacked, and their personal data stolen. And once again, where's the NSA in all this? The NSA is there to keep watch on law-abiding citizens, to make sure we're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts, to make sure that we're taking our required vaccinations and buying the things the government thinks we should be buying. And they are totally powerless against real criminals and real terrorists. We proved that with our NSA challenge on this website. 6 NSA challenges, not one of them was solved. And the NSA would have had a really strong motive to crack one of my codes, to discourage other people from doing the same thing. Instead, they're just ignoring me with dignity. Now, as long as we're on the subject of computers, I have been rather hard on the Hewlett-Packard Company. Now, a long time ago, I loved Hewlett-Packard. They made the very best of equipment. I learned about them when I was working for NASA, and I loved their equipment. Then Carly Fiorina got in, and everything they were selling on the consumer level was garbage. We almost lost our animation company. We started up, I was buying all Hewlett-Packard equipment because I remembered how reliable and durable it was, only in this case it wasn't. This is what ultimately led to Carly Fiorina being fired from Hewlett-Packard. And I've been wondering ever since, have they ever recovered? Well, I've got good news to report. Not too long ago, my trusty HP28C calculator finally died, and this is not a complaint. That thing was very, very old. It had provided years of service. I cannot say that I did not get value for money. So I decided to take a chance, and I went out and I found, oh, we just lost our connection. Okay. We seem to be still... Okay, are we back now? Yes, I think we're back. Hello, 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 testing, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay. Sorry, some other board app just hung up the Skype. Sorry.
All right, so I'm back on the air?
You are live in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so pardon the interruption here, little gremlin. That giant mutant hamster in the wire wheel must have tripped and fallen. So anyway, I decided to take a chance, and I found on eBay a Hewlett-Packard 50G calculator. And I got it at a really, really good price. And I have to admit, I am very impressed with this. I am very impressed. And so I would say Hewlett-Packard has definitely recovered from the Carly Fiorina years. And, of course, I can't comment on its reliability and durability because I've only had it for a couple of weeks, but this thing is just absolutely amazing, and I'm having a lot of fun learning how to program it. So, Hewlett-Packard, I guess we're friends again, at least for the moment. Well done on that calculator. Now then, let's talk about human-caused global warming, because the old Farmer's Almanac was certainly right. Over in Washington State, they're already starting to open up the ski resorts because of the early snow. Crystal Mountain Resort got several inches of fresh snow, and a lot of people were saying they're surprised to see snow this early in the season. I got an email from somebody saying they live near the Rockies. The snow was down to 2,500 feet. Now, the snow has also been a blessing for those areas dealing with these out-of-control wildfires, which were being blamed on human-caused global warming. But the reality is that as the economy has deteriorated and money being spent on war, the funds for maintaining the brush areas, keeping the fire breaks open, has been cut off. And so inevitably you get a huge buildup of dead overburden, and that's what leads to the wildfires. So the snow is coming down and it's helping them get those fires back under control. Apparently going to the Sun Road in Glacier National Park has had to be shut because of snow. They don't know when that's going to reopen. So, yeah, we're going to have another hard winter. And already the carbon Nazi propagandists are out there saying, no, you don't understand. Human-caused global warming causes ice-cold winters. The colder the winter, the worse the human-caused global warming is. Really, we wouldn't lie to you about that. And of course they would. The whole thing was a lie. The whole thing was a hoax. Trick you out of carbon taxes. Trick you into letting some government agency tell you how to live your life. Anybody who says there's no such thing as wide-ranging government conspiracies to defraud the people, we got one right here, staked out naked on the ground for you to study and learn from. And it included NASA, NOAA, academic institutions like Penn State, University of East Anglia, the United Nations at the IPCC. It was all a giant fraud. So, I'm sure Al Gore is out there somewhere whining and crying about how Mother Nature has just turned traitor on him. And it was a fraud. And Al Gore was never an environmental scientist. It was just a scam. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Let's talk about some science and technology. Russia is launching a new program of cooperation with Great Britain and Germany for space exploration. Russia's making deals. U.S. is trying to make war. I saw apparently some of the NASA top officials are out there saying it's absolutely shameful that we have to ride with the Russians up to the space station, which, yeah, it kind of is. Unfortunately, the United States has forgotten how to make a reliable rocket engine. I'm sure America's astronauts are saying, it's okay, we'll ride with the Russians. They actually get up there. And apparently Russia's Soyuz TMA-16M spaceship has successfully redocked to another ISS module. Now, China is getting ready to make some history. They're going to send their Chang'e 4 probe to the far side of the moon. Now, it is an historical fact that all soft landings on the moon, manned and unmanned, have been on the side facing the Earth, obviously for ease of communication. But the Chinese are taking the backup of the Chang'e 3, which is already on the moon, rolling around and doing all kinds of fun stuff, and they're going to pair it with an orbiter for relaying information, and they're going to put the lander down on the far side of the moon. Now, it's kind of a publicity stunt because I don't think they're going to find anything on the far side of the moon that they don't see on this side. The only thing the far side of the moon would really be good for is a radio astronomy observatory because the moon would shield it from all the noise coming from Earth. And we could listen for things like, AC hum from other civilizations out there, which I think needs further examination as a possible way of detecting the existence of extraterrestrial intelligent civilizations. Alrighty, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. Mike, I got a couple of questions for you. One, what do you think of this stock market going up 300 and something, down one day, down 300 and something? This is something. Don't people understand there's something wrong? I mean, I see the cheerleaders there. Oh, it went up again. But, you know, there's something very, very bad about stock market that's like that.
Well,
the other thing is, the thing I want to ask you about is the Kurds, and this attack by the Turks and the Kurds today. The Kurds are the best people out there, and our allies, our so-called allies, the Turks, just attacked them, our NATO allies.
Yes, it's a huge mess because, you know, the Kurds were supposed to be on our side, at least in Iraq. And it is a major escalation between, Turkey sending in ground forces to Iraq, Israel uncorking on Gaza again. Everybody is rushing to get the world war going, so they got something to blame the crashing global economy on. That's what this is all about. They're in a race to get a real bloody global war going as a distraction and cover for the fact that they've mismanaged the global economy into a disaster. And it was always going to be that way because under private central banking, it's naturally unstable. It cannot perpetuate. Sooner or later, it crushes every nation enslaved to that system under unpayable debt. That's exactly what's going on. Now, regarding the stock market itself, we've known that the U.S. government has been manipulating the stock market going back to the plunge protection team during the Clinton administration. It's illegal to do, but they're doing it, and every time they do it, they destroy the short sellers. So this money doesn't come out of nowhere. Real people are being hurt and ruined by this manipulation. But from the point of view of the government, they can't let the stock market correct because all the Wall Street firms who've taken part in the plunge protection games by buying these huge blocks of stock now have that stock on their balance sheet. In the event of a major market correction, all of these institutions will be instantly insolvent overnight. And so they're stuck. They have to keep on propping up the market until finally everybody just bails on it, saying it's completely pointless. And there'll be this illusion of a stock market supported by the illusion of solvent Wall Street banks, and all of it propped up by the illusion of real money coming out of the Federal Reserve.
Well, don't people understand this? And not only don't buy stocks, but let's just dump our stocks and bring this baby down, and then we can build it back up again. Well,
let me draw a line here. I'm not eager to see the stock market correct because the way the system is set up, they're going to make ordinary Americans pay for it all, because that is key to a fascist economic dictatorship, that when things go bad, the people are forced to pay for it all, which we've already been doing with TARP and quantitative easing, and now they're already talking about quantitative easing 4. And, real people are going to get hurt in a market downturn. Businesses are going to shut down. People are going to lose their job. I'm not anxious to see it. It's amazing that they have managed to hold it off as long as they have. But the law of gravity has to reassert itself at some point. And a big part of it, of course, is going to be the rest of the world continuing to turn away from the dollar. And, I think people ought to be seriously thinking about negative interest rates on their savings account and thinking about getting into physical silver and gold, or even copper and, any commodity base to preserve their wealth.
Yeah, but they manipulated the gold and silver market too.
They are. They're trying to keep the prices down, but that's a good opportunity for people to be buying into it. And don't look at the gold and silver prices day to day, because you'll get ulcers doing that. But over the long term, look at how gold has performed against the stock market and against the banks. It's done very, very well, even with all the rigging. So at some point, physical metal is going to start breaking free of all the paper contracts. It's already starting to happen. There's a lot of dealers out there where they're charging the spot price for silver and gold as it's set by the riggers. Then they have a premium on top of it for wanting physical instead of paper.
All right. I guess he pretty much explained it. But, hey, Mike, I just want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
When are you guys going to get it together again? And, the alternate media, and stop, fighting with each other? You're too valuable to all of us. I'm talking about you, Alex Jones, and a few other people.
Well, I haven't been talking about Alex Jones all that much. If he's saying something about me, I'm in agreement that the independent media is not mature enough to start engaging in these kind of rivalries. But I generally tend not to talk about my fellow broadcasters.
No, it's just that I noticed that you guys don't. You used to be on a show and all that. And,
well, we had a major disagreement regarding Israel, and at that point we sort of ignore each other with dignity. And I do owe Alex a debt, because he was the one who got me my first radio show here at GCN back in 2007, and I'm not going to forget that. But we agree to disagree on the subject of Israel. He's very pro-Israel. There's a YouTube video out there where he's just saying, I will always be a friend of Israel. And I disagree. I think Israel's government has been behaving very, very badly. And it's, we have a right to comment on that. Anyway, Mark, need to let you go. Yeah, got to go for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I want to give you a good example of how these people in the pharmaceutical corporations think. Now, we were talking about how the CDC has now admitted the polio vaccine is causing polio in a small number of people. The Washington Post reported it. Even worse, they're saying that this mutated polio virus created by the vaccine is capable of spreading beyond the patient and spreading in the wild, giving other people this new mutated polio. Now, to me, the obvious thing to do would be to immediately stop all polio vaccinations using this product and destroy it all. But no. The advice is, well, even though the oral polio vaccine has a small chance of giving you polio, you really should get vaccinated to protect yourself from this mutated polio that wouldn't exist at all if it were not for the vaccine recklessness. Wow, we've accidentally created a whole new serious disease. We're going to make a fortune off of this. And it's a reminder they're playing very dangerous, reckless games with all this new technology. It's been known for years that the oral polio vaccine had a problem with reverting to full polio potency, and now they've discovered it's a mutated strain. And they've put it out there. There are now vaccine-derived polio outbreaks. That's the name for it. They've got some in Ukraine and down in Mali. To me, it makes common sense. Stop using that product. Destroy what's left of it. No. Just sell more of it. Remember when they had this University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where all these people came down with mumps, and they'd had the mumps vaccine not once but twice because of paperwork issues? And the state health agency came out and said, well, get a third shot. You know, that's it. It's all about selling shots, selling product, selling medicine. Now, if they're that reckless with the vaccines, you can presume they're being that reckless with the GMOs. And that carries even more danger than simply a mutated polio virus, because they're tinkering with the code of life itself. If that epicyte gene has broken into the wild and contaminates all of the world's corn supply, which is only a matter of time, we're looking at an extinction-level event. That may be why we don't see advanced intelligent civilizations stop by for a visit on a vacation or something. Maybe every intelligent species reaches this crisis point where they develop the means to tinker with their own life's code. And they make a mistake and they destroy themselves. Just something to think about. Last phone call for the day. Janelle out in California. Aloha, Janelle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Have you heard about the young Native American woman who was expelled at Cal Sacramento by her history professor because she challenged him about genocide? Can I say his name?
Sure, go ahead.
Maury, M-A-U-R-Y, Wiseman.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked him if the Native Americans, it was about genocide, and he said that he didn't want to put the name of genocide to what happened to the Native Americans. And her last name is Johnson. Her first name is kind of long, and I didn't try to learn it, but it begins with C-H. And I think that story deserves a lot of attention. She was totally right. She went back home and did research and presented it to him. And he said she was hijacking his class and everything. And I think that story deserves a lot of attention.
Well, I'll hunt that down here. We know that it is a policy of Israel's government that the term genocide only be applied to what supposedly happened to the Jews in World War II. And anytime somebody else comes out and says, well, this was a genocide, they go, no, it wasn't, it was a horrible crime, but and yeah, it's just part of that whole propaganda thing. So yeah, I will try and hunt that story down. If you have a URL, if you could email it to me, and I'll make sure it gets up there.
What's the URL?
Well, the website where you're reading the story from.
Okay.
Up at the top of the browser it says http:// and a bunch of other stuff. And if you could just send that to me to help me find out more about the story, or just drop me an email with all the various names in it, and I'll hunt it down with the search engine.
And what's your email address?
It's WRH Whiskey Romeo Hotel at WhatReallyHappened.com. If you go to my website, there's a little email button at the top you can click.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you for pointing us at that story. And, yeah, what happened to the Native Americans was genocide. Genocide is a part of history, and nobody has a right to say it's our exclusive trademarked,
And yes, and a lot of other genocides, too. Well, thank you much.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines for the rest of the day here. Now, getting on back here, I was mentioning earlier, is there a connection between this saturation of prescription antidepressants and this seeming sudden epidemic of child sexual abuse all over the world? Now, one of David Cameron's associates got it. Over in Great Britain, the former Church of England bishop pleading guilty to sex abuse charges. Peter Ball, the former bishop of Lewes in Gloucester, admitted sexually abusing 18 young men decades after his first victims complained. Let's see. Now, there was a former Catholic archbishop was about to go on trial for child sexual abuse, Joseph Wesowski. Unfortunately, he's passed away. How lucky for the Vatican here. Maybe he accidentally used the same teacup as Pope John Paul I. And by the way, creationists have been absolutely ecstatic about this cave painting in Utah made by Native Americans, which appeared to show a pterodactyl. At least that's what they claimed when they looked at it. I looked at the original image and I didn't see what they saw. But they're saying, see, it proves dinosaurs coexisted with human beings. Well, too bad, because some experts have gone in there with some image processing and were able to, within the computer, remove centuries of grime and soot and so forth, and found out it's actually several different illustrations grouped together of ordinary people, small animals, a snake. There never was a pterodactyl in there. So sorry, all you creationists, just wasn't there. Now, Pope Francis is stirring up a lot of controversy. He's calling for a global government. He was praising this lesbian author for spreading Christian values. Apparently, he's trying to consolidate power in the Holy See, and he's running into resistance from the Vatican leadership. But he's got a little bit of comic relief because the Jewish High Court, a self-declared Sanhedrin, has demanded Pope Francis apologize for recognizing the Palestinian state. And I'm sure Pope Francis is going to try very hard not to laugh about that. But that's what's been going on over there in Rome. It's a beautiful place, by the way, the Vatican. All right, now there's an interesting little article here. And it's talking about our society's obsession with awards and prizes. And it makes a valid point. I'm going to share that with you when we come back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm looking at this article over in Family Circle. It's titled, Not Every Kid Deserves a Prize. And it's talking about this tendency in our society to offer rewards and prizes to kids to build up their self-esteem in the absence of any real accomplishment. Participation trophies and so forth, which kind of undermines getting a trophy if you get one just for showing up. And they're talking about this growing sense that all children in schools ought to be treated exactly the same regardless of their performance and accomplishment level. And this is not a new idea. Years and years ago, I taught a year of high school remedial math, which ended my love with the high school level teaching process. And on lunch hours, I was teaching slide rule, which tells you how old this is, this story, to the smart kids in the class. And we got a complaint. The other parents are saying, you should be teaching all of our kids slide rule. Yeah, I will, if they have the smarts to know what I'm doing. But the government decided that equality of outcome was the same thing as equality of opportunity. And we have seen repeatedly, especially under Common Core, the smart kids are ignored, neglected, now given drugs so that the dullards can feel like they're just as good as everybody else. We're exceptional. We're the greatest nation on earth. All right, a couple of breaking stories before we hit the top of the hour and the end of the program. Remember how we were talking last week when Brian Pagliano, the Hillary Clinton staffer who set up her server in her home, took the Fifth Amendment testifying before Congress. Senators Charles Grassley and Ron Johnson, who are the chairman of two key committees investigating what's been going on, have now offered him immunity. And that means he can't plead the Fifth any longer without being in contempt of Congress. And so I fully expect that Brian's going to get really, really depressed, and he's going to be found in Fort Marcy Park, or he's going to have a mishap on an aircraft somewhere. But Brian Pagliano now has to offer, has to basically tell the senators what they're asking, because self-incrimination doesn't apply if he's got immunity. Now, I've already been sent updates on that story that the caller called in. Sacramento State University is saying that the student in question was not actually expelled from the course, as initially reported. She's still in the course, according to the administration. History professor Maury Wiseman basically said that this student, Chiita Anaba Johnson, was trying to hijack the class by saying that what happened to the Native Americans qualified as genocide. And, of course, Maury Wiseman's attitude is, no, of course not. It's not a genocide. It's terrible. It's not a genocide. So they're trying to calm that one down, but she has not been expelled from the course. But she's a valid point. Yeah, it was a genocide. Remember that thing with the smallpox blankets? If that doesn't qualify as an act of genocide, I don't know what does. Now, over at Debian, which is a group that is working with Linux development, they have come up with what they think is an idea to make software trustworthy again. And this is in the wake of the revelation that the CIA compromised the Apple developers' build process, the software development kit, because it turns out that Apple software development kit had inside it devices to plant backdoors and loopholes into app developers' software without their knowledge. So the developer would be writing this little ping-pong application, he'd compile it, and the compiler itself would install the spyware and backdoors for the government. So Debian's come up with this solution, a concept called reproducible builds, where apps would be distributed not as a finished binary app, but the components necessary for end users to compile and build them themselves to make sure they're free of malware. That's not entirely a new idea. Many years ago, when we had a bad incident with malware in a Flash advertisement on our website, which is why Flash is now banned at WhatReallyHappened.com, and we made it a rule after that, we would accept Flash only if we got the original Shockwave file so that we could inspect the action script. And, of course, at that point, all the people wanting to put Flash ads on our website went away because we weren't letting them have their fun. But it is a reminder that all of the corporate software hardware providers have been compromised by the CIA, by the NSA, who seem to feel that your computers and software really belong to them. By the way, this is all a violation of the Fifth Amendment, not the part about self-incrimination. But read that amendment all the way to the bottom. The government is not allowed to take your personal property for their use without just compensation. All this government spyware is taking up room on your hard drives, room in your RAM, They're using your bandwidth you pay for. They're using compute cycles on your computer. They are stealing from you to run this spy network. It is unconstitutional. It's not just a violation of the Fifth Amendment, clearly a violation of the Fourth Amendment, clearly a violation of the Ninth and Tenth Amendments. They're almost batting 500 in terms of defying the Constitution of the United States of America. And I understand there's a lot of people in the federal government who don't want to abide by that Constitution any longer. And just like Kim Davis not wanting to hand out gay marriage licenses, your only moral, ethical recourse is to resign. Because that Constitution is the original contract with America. It's the rules under which we, the people, allow the government to act as custodian to our national sovereignty. And if the government isn't going to play by the rules, they're not a legal, legitimate government. And on a more practical note, all of this spying has hammered America's IT industry. Nobody wants to buy American-produced software anymore. Nobody wants to buy American-designed computers anymore, even though they're made in Asia. They don't want to use any American cloud providers. Remember when somebody was out there the other day saying that Russia's new law saying that Russian data has to be kept on Russian servers, it proves Russia's trying to control the Internet. No, Russia just wants to keep its privacy. Privacy is a right, an inalienable right. It cannot be taken away from us. And if the government refuses to respect your right to privacy, you have every right to take steps to guard your privacy. Because it's none of the government's business what new product you're developing, what your investment strategy is going to be, pictures you've taken of your scantily clad significant other, your Aunt Mary's top secret chocolate chip cookie recipe. The Fourth Amendment says hands off until the government knows a crime is in progress. They are not allowed to just go digging around in your records looking for an opportunity to engage in civil forfeiture or blackmail you. And again, we have to look at the NSA's batting average against real criminals, hackers, and terrorists. They're batting 0, absolute 0. Kaspersky thinks the hacker group Equation Group is the NSA. The NSA may be the biggest computer criminals on the entire planet. They're certainly criminal under the strict interpretation of the Bill of Rights. And a criminal government is an illegitimate government. It is not the legal government of this land, and we owe them no allegiance or loyalty. Because loyalty is a two-way street. You want us to be loyal to you, you be loyal to that Bill of Rights and that Constitution. Them's the rules. And we've had way too much of government and politicians thinking the rules do not apply to them. That's what's gotten us into this mess. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We will be back tomorrow, Wednesday, Hump Day, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, share what you know with everyone you know. We have to get the truth out while there's still time to stop this world war. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.